Hello and welcome to Prime Lenses. I'm Ian. Each week I interview a photographer about lenses that have meant something to them on their photographic journey. Or at least I do normally. But not this week. This week my guest is Sean Tucker, a photographer from the northeast of England who has published a number of photography books, has a successful YouTube channel, and most recently turned his hand to the written word in a book called The Meaning in the Making. In his book, he talks, much like he does on his YouTube channel, about creativity, about the way that we make things, and I really love the way that he encourages people to understand themselves before kind of going and making. We get into that during the conversation. Sean and I have got mutual friends, and I've wanted to talk to him for years, so I was really excited to get a chance to sit down with him for an hour or so. I don't think this conversation will disappoint. Without further ado, here is Sean. A long-running joke after you moved. So we used to live in Great Broughton, just down the road from you. And there was a long-running joke after you moved where I would say to my wife every time we drove by, like going south or going down to York or whatever, I was like, yeah, we might see Sean. We might see him this time. and she's away in the States at the moment. And so I've promised her, like, I promise you he exists. Like she would normally have been here and sort of poked her head in. But yeah, it's like, no, I promise you Sean exists. He's not generated AI voice on a podcast recording.
No, I'm afraid not. All real and all fairly ordinary and boring.
Well, aren't we all when it comes down to it? These people, they just put their trousers on one leg at a time, just like the rest of us. But yeah, how's Yorkshire today? What's the weather like? Is it nice?
It is cloudy but not cold, which is good.
It's freezing and wet up here, up in the Highlands, and we have been given a yellow weather warning. I think basically we're going to need to build an ark, and it's gonna stop raining in about a week's time. They've said it was like the news this morning on the local radio was like, it's the start of the school holidays and it's going to rain for a week. It's just like,
enjoy.
Yes, good luck. But that's what like warm blankets, hot cocoa, and jigsaws and board games are for.
Absolutely.
Yes. So yeah. No, it's nice. But yeah, thank you for doing this. I'm really excited to have a conversation because I've been reading your book and I've been watching your videos for a long, long time, as a lot of people probably have. And I think I've always really enjoyed the way that you talk about creativity and talk about work and talk about those pursuits. And it was only really when I sat down and read the book that, like, this is the danger when you talk to people who you've watched their content for a long time, is that you've sort of absorbed a lot of their experiences in time, some of them in real time. Like sometimes it means that you could talk to them about lots of things, but it also means that it's only when I sat down and looked at the book and you sort of compress things together in pages rather than have them happen over years. You've done so much to get to this point before you were even photographer, trying different things out and like posting stuff online. And now I wanted to start really by asking you whether you considered yourself almost a bit more of a writer, or whether you put yourself in a kind of creative box anymore, because you've done so many things.
Yeah, I don't think I do really put myself in a box because, photography wasn't always my thing either. That's in my journey, it's relatively new. I mean, I've only been doing it about, 15 years, I would say. But before that, it was, I was in bands for 10 years before that. So it was music was sort of front and center. Public speaking, obviously, with working with the church. I used to draw a lot as a kid. That used to be a thing for a while. Yeah, then it became video first, actually, and then photography, and then writing has come back a few times in my life. I don't really feel the need to say I'm this sort of creative person. And I feel like if you took photography away from me, that I just find another way to keep making stuff to talk about things I care about. It's far more important, like getting stuff out, I think, is far more important. And the mode, to me, I'm not precious about any of the modes. Like I'm happy that I built the skill set I built. That feels good. But yeah, I'm always open to it shifting and changing. And my friend Jeffrey always says to me, like, that he reckons that as things stand now, the things I've written stand a chance of outlasting the images that I've taken by a long way. And I'd agree with that. And I'm comfortable with that. Like, I'm okay with that. It doesn't need to be, not everything has to be legacy stuff, and photography holds a slightly different space in my life, I suppose, in my output. So yeah, I mean, I don't, as long as I get to make stuff, I'm happy.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think the nice thing is you've not fallen into the trap. I think because I was talking to Simon a few weeks ago, like Simon's
Yes.
done the same thing of he's not fallen into the trap of like I have to post every day or every week or like
Yeah.
creating for creating's sake and feeding the machine in that way.
Yes.
Like Dave Herring, who I interviewed fairly early on in the podcast, does this thing on his videos where he says, if you're new, I'm Dave, and I post a video here twice a week unless something's gone terribly wrong, right? And that's a thing, and it's his personal brand and whatever.
Yeah.
But I think that it's nice that the variety exists, that you don't have to just feed the content machine in order
Yeah.
to be creating. If he wants to do that and if he's enjoying, then that's great and more power to him. But I
Absolutely.
think
Yeah.
I find more interesting at least, that people are going in different directions. That maybe that's kind of where you started with sort of fairly regular posting, when a lot of people have maybe come across you, posting videos to YouTube or something, you're putting things in a more public place, aren't you?
Yeah, but my schedule is always very, very scant. Like, I mean, I never want. I couldn't make a video every week. I don't have an interesting thing to say every week.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of the trap that people get into is that they think that they try and play the algorithm game, which is dangerous because the algorithm is always changing anyway. So it's a fool's errand, really. And they think, well, they hear 1,000 talks. You have to do it this often. You have to make this many videos. You have to. I've only ever made. The maximum I ever did, and I only did it for 2-3 years, was 2 videos a month. But most of the time I've been doing it's just 1 video a month. And I thought to myself, if I'm in this for the long haul, I have to do something that's sustainable, no excuses.
Yes.
And there is no excuse. I can make a decent video every month. There's no excuse for that. And that means I won't burn out on it, and I can pursue other projects in between. Like, it's important for me. It's not just a job. It's something that helps with a bit of income, but I don't want it to take over my life. I want to keep the space for the other projects too. And same with Instagram, really. I mean, I'll post stuff to Instagram, but I mean, maybe twice a week, something like that. And what I do post is not like some hero image that I think the world should see because it's brilliant. It's just to keep the conversation going and to keep things ticking over. I don't take it too seriously. It's the thing with social media, isn't it? Like, if you start to try and serve it because you think you can crack the algorithm and get popularity, that's when the anxiety levels rise and you start to feel like, you have no control over this, because you don't have any control over this is the fact.
Yes.
You just don't. Or you can just use it the way you want to use it and let the outcomes be whatever they are. And I've always had that approach. What am I willing to use it for? And then whatever happens, whatever audience comes or goes, that's what it is. But I'm not willing to kill myself to slave over it. It's not.
No. I think the point you make about it being you're not in control of it, I think is the thing that a lot of people have been feeling recently. And I think the sort of the growth in popularity again, sort of it goes in ebbs and flows of things like podcasts, and people are building websites again, and Twitter collapsing. The social web as we knew it is starting to kind of fragment and fall apart. And then you've got, like Instagram is becoming TikTok. Threads is now kind of the new Instagram. I wrote about that this morning in the newsletter that I do to like a small number of people, and it was like, that's quite nice at the moment. It's quite a nice place. But even in that newsletter, I sort of ended my bit on Threads by saying, but we kind of have to enjoy it now, because it won't. The only thing we can say for certain is it won't stay this way. Sooner or later, they're going to monetize it, and they'll press the button, and then it will become ads for days, and then we'll all. Every other post will be people bemoaning the fact, this used to be a nice supportive place, and now I keep seeing just ads for socks, and but the money's got to come from somewhere. If 175 million people are posting to this thing, it's got to get funded at some point. No one, and there's a whole separate conversation you can have, I suppose, about whether or not someone building something of that scale should have more of a social conscience about the thing they've built, because I think there is none of these companies wanted to be publishers. I think that's the problem, but they are. And I don't think they really understand that there's a bit of a social responsibility. Like, newspapers are accountable. Like we've built systems around publishing and newspapers. If Penguin publish your book or something and you've said, all people with green hair are dreadful, it's like, well, there's an accountability there. You're like, right, okay, now what? Whereas sticking it on the internet, you just press send, which has been the problem with the internet since the beginning. No one knows you're a dog. So you're absolutely right. I think there's I'm enjoying the Threads thing right now, but I know it could be months before it's ruined.
But I mean, you're right though. Like these companies don't care about us as creators. They don't care because they're companies. Their only goal is to make money for their shareholders. And the way that they do that is by selling advertising on the work that we post. We don't pay for these platforms. They're not ours. We don't own them. I think we have this idea that, oh, Instagram just has a really good heart and it wants to help me as a photographer to share my work with the world. That is
Yeah.
not what they think.
No.
And the minute we get that into our heads, we can temper our expectations. Like, I can use this company, this platform I have for free where people seem to be hanging out to give myself a chance for my work to be seen. But I can't then get on and go, well, you guys are awful because you promised me. They don't care. They're a company. They don't care. And it sounds harsh, but I really think we need to think about it like that, because then we go, okay, I'm just going to use this company as best I can, and it's going to change. It's going to be out of my control. And when it doesn't work, I'm going to go somewhere else. But thinking they owe us something, I think, is a mistake, because they don't think about it like that. They just don't.
No, definitely not. Neela Patel at The Verge has a really good thing that when he stopped using Twitter, he was like, the reason I've stopped using Twitter is because every time I post, I'm working for the richest man in the world. And
Yes.
That seems,
well, yeah.
It just seems like the wrong way around.
Yeah, I mean, it's like if when I post videos onto YouTube, ads get attached to those videos. I don't get to choose what they are. Ads just go on those videos, and YouTube is selling ad space on my videos that I spend a lot of time over to put them out. They don't care what the video is. They just care that there's space on it to stick ads on it. That's all they care about. And if I disappear tomorrow because I have a tantrum and go, I don't like YouTube anymore, they won't even notice. They don't care. And I get it. You know, they're a company. They're too big. They've grown too fast, and they don't care about individual creators. So we're just using a platform that exists to try to get a work out there, but they just don't owe us anything.
No, they don't. It's funny because I've been thinking about a lot about this probably for the last sort of year and a half in greater depth, and that's why I launched the website again and just wanted to blog, and it felt like the 90s again and building stuff. But you were talking about in the book, like working with Werner Herzog and getting some sort of, he seems like a really interesting person who throughout his career has defied the sort of the trends and convention and continues to be a really great creative force. And like one of the first things he recommended, I think, that you go and read was a book, like a fairly obscure book. I can't remember which one it was now, but like
The Peregrine by J.A. Baker. Yeah.
Yes. How do you think about, are people like him the people that you sort of try and keep in the back of your mind? You're charting your own course, but I tend to glom on to people who their perspective and outlook kind of meshes with mine, I guess, but they also give me that kind of bump and inspiration, because I think it's very easy to be seduced by some of the platforms and likes and things.
Yeah, I'm always looking for the outliers. You know, I mean, Werner Herzog is in the world of filmmaking is a real outlier. You know, he makes quite quirky documentaries and he makes some feature films, but they really have a very dark, particular Bavarian point of view. Do you know what I mean? Like that's just what I mean. His voiceovers are so, they're like almost hypnotic and melancholic, but. And he's not making films to try and make them blockbusters. It's not his intention. You can tell in the way that he makes them. He knows he's going to have a niche audience, but he's determined to put stuff out to the world that has his perspective, his very unique perspective. And I'm always attracted to people like that. You know, I can go sit and watch a Marvel movie because it's just mindless fun, but I often find myself getting bored in the middle of it with all the flashy CGI and the pretty predictable storylines. You know, whereas something like that surprises me and challenges me, and I you know, those are the people I look for. That's the kind of work I want to make in the long run. So it's not it, and that's in that lies the choice. What are you making the work for? If you're making it for fame and fortune, then you just have to punch stuff out through the kind of template of whatever's working now. In which case, you're probably going to sacrifice your opportunity to bring your own creative voice to the fore, or you can risk making work you really believe in that might only appeal to one group of people, but that group of people are going to be your diehard fans till the day you die, because they can only get that work from you. And I feel like for me, it was never about big numbers attached to stuff. It was always about, I want to make the stuff I want to watch that would challenge me or encourage me. And I understand that not everyone is wired like me. I don't want to make something broadly popular for the sake of getting more traction around it, but I feel like I'm losing myself in it.
Yeah, there's a TV show, I know, because you like games a little bit. I work in games, and the TV show Mythic. Yeah, it's really fun. It's much better than a proper job, I will say that. But the TV show Mythic Quest, which is on Apple TV Plus, is a comedy series about a video game studio. And I will say the things they get right, oh boy, do they get them right. Because one of the episodes, every season, they give themselves an episode to kind of do something weird with. So there's the normal kind of episode to episode, and kind of like there's the long running stories. And then I think it was in the first season, the episode that it was like episode 6 or 7, they give themselves the chance to just tell a completely different story with characters who've not been involved. It's set in the 90s, and it's about a couple who make a game called Dark Quiet Death. And in the game, you can't win. Like, that's the point. You're in the dark, it's quiet, and eventually you die, and you can't actually stop yourself from dying, like, you know. And it's a comment on like the human condition and things like that. And then gradually, because they become wildly successful, there comes a point where like then designers and people coming in go, well, you should have a flashlight. And then eventually there's like a shotgun gets added, and then eventually you can win. And by the end of it, they're falling out because they're like, they took away the dark and we said nothing, you know, and then they took away the quiet, and now and it's not even the same game anymore. But they're minted, and they're driving around in a nice car, and they're enjoying their life. But the point of the story being that you've sacrificed something. And I think that's a really, like, if people are going to the trouble of making expensive episodes of television about it to like talk through this fear of the creative process that they have, I think it's more writ large. And I think that's what I like about your book, is like the dangers of, you know, I like grounding something in you're only a man, you're only a person, right? You're this one person doing a thing, as opposed to the kind of hustle culture that exists, which seems unsustainable and unrealistic a lot of the time.
I think so. Yeah, it's also, it creates such. I mean, it's the difference. It's kind of the difference between British and American culture in a way, isn't it? It's like you go to school in America and you're told you can achieve anything. You're special. You can do it all. And I just think, what kind of pressure and expectation does that build in somebody when they don't achieve what they want to achieve, which is most of us. You've set them up to believe that they should be able to have everything they want, when we know that the reality is we have to hold our dreams much lighter than that and be willing to adjust, because we can't get everything we want. We're not entitled to everything we want. And it's, I don't say that to kill people's dreams. I made videos like that and had people in the comment section, probably Americans, get very upset with me, like, you're killing people's dreams. I'm like, I'm not. I'm actually saving them from anxiety, I think, because there's a parallel to when I used to work in the church, where there were a sort of denomination of Christianity that's kind of the Pentecostal side, where there's this sort of charismatic Pentecostal, where you were told that you could have all the wealth and riches that you wanted. You just had to pray and have enough faith, right? And this was like pushed on very, very poor people in South Africa, where I was living, so that they thought like, oh yeah, I can get rich. I just need to pray and have enough faith. But then of course they'd pray for a while and they didn't suddenly get rich. And then what happens? You don't think about them afterwards, because who cares? And then the church would point them, well, go, it's your fault, you don't have enough faith. So now, not only am I struggling financially, I feel guilty that there's something wrong with me, that I can't get everything that I want. And that happens in that kind of, you know, hugely aspirational culture, where you're told you're entitled to any success and any job and any amount of money you want. And there's a photography version of that too. Okay, that's great. So you've got something to aim for, but what do you do when you don't get it? Because we've all had that. Do you then go, well, I'm a failure because I was entitled to this, I must be defective somehow? Or do we hold it lighter and go, well, I'm going to shoot for the stars and the things that I really want, but when I don't get them, I'm going to admit to myself that we often don't get the things that we want, and I'm going to sidestep and keep moving and just keep moving, keep adapting. And that's how life goes. And I may never arrive at, this is brilliant, I've made it, it's everything I wanted it to be. It's a constant messy journey, and that's okay. It's normal, it's good. It's the way it should be. How could it be any other way, right?
Yeah, well, I think it's kind of how good creative work happens, isn't it? Like my thing that I've said a few times on the podcast is around iteration cycles. I think you have to have done something. You've presumably found this with the books, that your most recent photo book, you know, because you do them annually, so the most recent one presumably contains many things you've learned. From, you know, if you look back at the first one, you know, we have it with games when we work on stuff, like you only see the problems. Like, you know, you get, we did Red Dead Redemption recently on the Switch. Amazing. And it's brilliant. And I love playing that game because I'm not in the day-to-day development of it. I work with the team, but the team will point to all the things that they wish they'd had more time to sort out, or that just millions of people don't notice. What millions of people know is, I'm holding this in my hand and I love it. And you have to kind of distance yourself from the thing. You know, I'm sure filmmakers have it all the time as well. Like, if I could just have a minute, I'd just go back and tweet.
I've just come back from an annual retreat that I do in Italy every year, and as part of this retreat, we take 2 mornings and split the groups into 2. Like we have and we have people present their work to a group, like some of their images, and have the group talk about what they're seeing in those images. And it's fascinating to watch people when they present their work, their images, because most of them will start with, well, I just want to explain, this isn't very good, and here's these mistakes. I know there's lots of problems with it. And I always stop them and go, just shut up. Just show us your work, because I don't want you to point out the mistakes. I want you to hear how people take in your work when you're not there to make excuses for it. And it's so validating for them, because they'll all come out of the sessions and go, wow, there's so much positive in this work that I was missing because I was obsessing about the tiny flaws in it. I didn't understand how people took this in. And it's always more positive than you think, always, for most of us, because we're really hard on ourselves.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot to that. Yeah.
Yeah. How did those retreats and things come about? Because that's quite a big thing to plan. Like, I'm an old, I come from project management, right? So I'm an old school Prince 2 project manager. So immediately when people talk about making things like that, there's a lot of logistics. I was talking to Christelle from the Raw Society about this. How did you kind of start?
Yeah, well, in my case, it was easy, because I'd written the book, and the third chapter in the book is about sort of taking space for yourself to recharge that creativity, find inspiration again, take that deep creative in-breath, and retreat was part of that. And it was my friend, I worked with a friend in the last full-time job I had with a company. He was one of the lead designers, and I was the photography video guy. And we became good friends there. And he said to me, because he used to help with yoga retreats, and he said, why don't you do a retreat? You're kind of writing about it. Why don't you do it? And I said, I just don't want to do it. I'm allergic to admin. I don't enjoy. I really don't. It causes me like a lot of stress to have to organize something that big. He's like, don't worry, I'm brilliant at it. Why don't we partner together?
Oh, cool.
I'll do the admin side. You market it to your people. You come and run it, and I'll do all the logistical stuff. So it's kind of perfect for me.
Oh, brilliant.
So he just sort of takes all that on and organizes, and I get to just sort of, ask people to come and then take care of them while they're there. So it works out really well.
Oh, nicely. How many of those have you done now? Is it a couple of
years?
This
was the fourth one. Yeah.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah.
And just one a year.
Yeah. We'll just do one a year in the summer around the July time. So yeah, I think we booked again next year for July.
Oh, have you had people returning coming back, or is it always
a
cohort? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the first one was great, and then the second one, 50% of them were returning.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and then the third one we had 1 or 2 returns. This one we had 2 returns. So yeah, there's a little community. One person's been 3 times. There's of the 4. So there's a lot of people coming back, and there's a lot of community, because we form these WhatsApp groups for those retreat things as well. So they keep chatting through the year, and there's little community forums where they check in with each other. So it's lovely to see. I always feel like one of the biggest, apart from the fact that it's great to have a retreat, one of the biggest values from these retreats is that people get to come and do intentional community for a week, which is a rare thing in modern society. We're locking ourselves away in our homes, and we might go out and see people for a coffee, but it's like we're living together for 7 days, in and out, eating meals together, having deep conversations, locking in. Like, that's not something that we get to experience, especially when it's like, it's not going to a festival where music's the goal. So we're watching music, but we're not talking. This is about connecting. It's the whole point. And you see how hungry people are for proper community.
Yeah.
So that's great. Yeah.
Do you set them up to kind of create work while they're there, or are they bringing pre-created work and talking through projects?
Yeah, we encourage them not to make stuff when they're there. Right. We make the point of, it's not about doing this retreat. It's about taking a step back. So it's not about trying to be productive, as it were. So yeah, the feedback sessions are really just work that they pull together, sort of 10 to 15 images that they can share and sort of tell a bit of their story about, where they are in their journey, what they want to achieve, and then they keep quiet, and then we talk about it, and they get to listen in on what we're seeing in their work, which is really affirming. Yeah.
Oh, that's really nice. It must be lovely to see people progress through.
Yeah,
like
it's great.
As well.
Everyone who comes back, it's amazing to see, especially those who sort of do the repeats, see growth in a year. I mean, we all grow all the time, but just and how they talk about these retreats being a marker for them. I mean, one of the guys who came back this year was like, it was the first time he came last year, and he was like, something. It really stirred something in me, and spending time with him last year, I could tell that, from the conversations we were having. And he's like, it was unfinished business. I had to come back this year. So they sort of have these annual markers. I'm going to go back to Tuscany at this time, because that's that place where I get super intentional. And it could be anywhere. It doesn't have to be my retreat, but just having those markers in your year where you go, that's where I take a week out and I really go in and dig deep and do some hard soul searching and look at where I'm going. It's
Yeah.
all super healthy.
No, it's nice. I think so. One of the things I was thinking when I was reading and going back over your stuff in preparation was, I think I only realized this when I was reading the book, but I think I've thought of you in a kind of teaching space
Mm.
for a long time. Like, do
Mm.
you? I don't know if you would have started this thinking of yourself in that way, but I wondered whether you kind of think of yourself as a teacher now, or as like
Mm.
that might be part of your legacy stroke. The next chapter is more teaching focused and kind of
Yeah.
listening and playing stuff back to people. Like, is that how you think about it?
Definitely, yeah. I mean, it's something I embrace, and it's not new for me. I mean, you'll know from the book, I worked in the church for 10 years in South Africa. I was a pastor. I mean, and it's not teaching like giving information as much as, and this will bear out in the flavor of the channel that I've got. It's more, how can I share things I'm learning? How
Mm.
can we talk about what people have intuited about life in general and sort of talk about that as a group? And how can we get a handle on our own lives and have better mental health, deal with our
Mm.
anxieties, set goals for ourselves and make some progress and make the most out of the time we've got. That's the kind of teacher I want to be. I suppose I'd more readily relate it to some of the old philosophers, and it's not,
Yeah.
it's a difficult word, that, because people start thinking like, old bearded dude and ivory tower thinking, and you have to be super
Yeah.
clever. But I don't think that's what good philosophy is. I think, like, Socrates, for example, was put to death for corrupting the youth of Athens. That means he's
Mm.
talking to teenagers. So
Mm.
he's not trying to be super clever. He's trying to say, how can we get a handle on life? And it was so accessible that kids would come and listen to him. That's what I want to be able to do. Just take, the things I'm learning about life and put it in a space where we can chat about it and get some safety in numbers. And I think good philosophy is always as accessible as possible. It's not trying to be clever. In fact, I think those who are trying to be clever aren't actually that good at the philosophy, because it's translating it to everybody where it becomes helpful. You've only done half the job if you've had clever ideas that you can't communicate.
Yeah, or if a very small number. I've said this to someone yesterday, that if something sounds complicated, likely means you don't understand it.
Yes, exactly.
Someone was
Exactly.
it was preparing for an interview, and I was sort of doing a bit of prep with him, and he was describing a bunch of stuff, and I was like, okay, let's have a go at that again. But
Yeah,
you need to be able to break down. I know you understand it. You're kind
yeah,
of tripping over yourself, and if you make it sound complicated and then go, oh, but there's this bit of that. If you've not got your ducks in a row, it just makes it sound like you don't really understand it. Whereas actually, it's nerves in that case.
exactly.
But again, for me, iteration cycles, practice,
Yeah.
like it's, in whatever it is that you're doing. I think
Mm.
that's the key thing. But yeah, I like as well when you've talked about being self-centered as well,
Mm.
but in a positive way.
Hmm.
And I wanted to touch on that because I wasn't sure if people listening would have come across that, but I think that's in a teaching kind of way.
Mm.
Could you expand a bit on that for people listening? Because I think that's a really useful thing.
Yeah, I mean, in the book, I sort of talk about ego, and it's funny because ego and self-centered are mostly used negatively. Like, if you say someone's got an ego or a big ego, you mean that badly. You mean like, well, you're an arrogant pain in the ass who's
Yeah.
opinionated, and I mean, ego for a start is very necessary. If we don't have an ego, we have a real problem. And Freud was the one who coined it. It's you have these three kind of modalities of your consciousness. So you've got your id and your ego and your superego. Your id at the core is like your primal survival drives for, like, procreation and eating and shelter, and like it's that flight or flight aggression. It's all those kind of like instinctual things. And on the other end of the scale, the superego is our sense of responsibility for the community around us and the world at large. It's the altruistic side of us. So the ego sits in between those two and mediates those. So it tries to balance out, like, who am I in a world where I have to, on the one side, meet the needs of my id because I'm a human being, and also live in a society and in a community with the world around me. And in that conversation, trying to balance those things out, we create a sense of self. How can I meet my own needs and also be a good human being in community? So that's the ego. You have to have it. If you don't have it, you don't have that sense of self. You don't know how to live and move in the world. So if we have that ego, that's who we are. It's how we're wired. It's what we care about. It's our personality type. It's where our creative voice comes from, and what the unique stuff that we individually have to offer the world. then I think it becomes important to stick to your guns on the things that you make. So when you make something, say like, well, I'm not trying to, again, make the reverse hack the algorithm of popularity to try and make something that everyone likes. I'm trying to make something that I could only make. And to do that, you have to be, in the book, I say, have to be self-centered. You have to be centered in yourself with the things that you make. You have to say, I believe that these are the sorts of images that I should go out and make. This is the things I want to say with them. This is what I want them to look like. Maybe no one else is doing it like that. That's all the more reason to do it that way. And then when the negative comments come in, like, this is rubbish, I don't get it, what a load of crap, you have to be self-centered and buy it. Like, I buy what I'm doing. I'm going to keep going and developing. I really believe in this. And that's kind of the flip side. We all know the bad side of the ego. We all know that, like, you can go way too far with that, and you can become somebody who refuses to listen to criticism because you always think you're right, and you are arrogant, and you do think you're better than everybody else. I mean, it's one of my favorite authors, Richard Rohr, says when the ego becomes uncalibrated, it tries to convince you of two things: that you're separate and superior somehow to everything else going on around you. That's bad ego. That's when it's gone too far. But before that, you need it. You need to have that self-belief and that self-motivation and that self-centeredness with your work that gives you the confidence to make stuff even if no one gets it initially. I think it's really important.
Yeah, I think it's when I was reading that and thinking about it, and I've got two young kids as well, one's 6 and one's 10, and you see kind of like as they move, they're very primal little creatures when they're very small, but their personalities are visible very quickly, and that kind of over time. And I think when you think about moving through your life, the thing that I find that's interesting about as you age is the thing that people say when they're very old about, sometimes it sort of rhymes with, I wish I hadn't spent so much time worrying about either what other people thought, or engaging in things that I didn't actually want to do through some sort of false sense of responsibility to that, either a process or a family or a thing, and I kind of trapped myself in that, and that led to resentment, and then that went down a dark path where eventually people flip out because they don't want to do it anymore, and it's because of some sort of misheld belief that they had to. And so I think that's why I really liked that part of the book. And when you talk about like your own Myers-Briggs like letters and stuff, like, I think understanding yourself first is kind of the life version of putting the oxygen mask on yourself before helping others on the plane. It's that if you don't really understand you, and you're not pretty comfortable knowing who you are, and just comfortable in a group of people going, okay, you do that, I don't want to do that, I'll see you later. I think that's extremely healthy, and is not the reason I wanted to call it out and sort of discuss it, and so thanks for going through it, is because I don't think that gets talked about a lot in terms of creative work. I think often because the stuff that gets clicks and views, and I've seen it in the last couple of weeks on Threads, YouTubers posting the stats for their videos, like, here's why I do gear reviews. Because when I do think about creativity or the fuel that drives me, 100 people watch it. And when I do something about why this Zeiss 35 is better than that Voigtlander 35, thousands upon thousands of people watch it. And so that just jumps up the chain, because that's what people are doing. So there's a flywheel effect. So I think that kind of understanding of yourself, super important, because I'm pretty confident we'll all get into our 70s and 80s and be like, I wasted time. Doing stuff in the morning.
It's back to the Werner Herzog thing, isn't it? He is obviously self-centered in that good way, that he knows what he wants to say, and he's not trying to win Oscars. He's trying to make films he believes in. And I think, somebody like that's an inspiration for me, because I think to myself, if I can start as early as possible, not trying to please the crowd and make the work I buy, and I have time to develop that through my life, where could I end up? And that's far more interesting work than trying to make middle of the road work, which is kind of designed to please everybody, but is super forgettable after a year or two because it looks like everything else. Like, I really want to make work that is more unique and has something to say. And that takes time. It takes a lot of time.
Yeah. I think it's that thing of, sometimes it can take so long to have an epiphany and realize what it is about your images, or what you do like or what you don't like. You mentioned the book, you don't look a lot at photo books, but do you get your inspiration from kind of broader philosophy and writing and music, and you cast your net quite wide, do you? I
mean, visually I'm far more inspired by cinema than photos. So I love film, and I have some favorite cinematographers too, and the storytelling aspect of cinematography and the use of light. I mean, it's become far more common now. I mean, we use that image looks cinematic as a compliment, you know. So I think it's how we think about stuff now. But yeah, I mean, I do have photo books and I do flick through them, but I definitely I never feel more jazzed up than after I've watched something that's breathtakingly beautiful. I mean, I've just recently finished watching this Netflix series Ripley, which is all filmed in black and white. Well, graded in black and white, and just some of the most beautiful cinematography I've seen on the screen. And I always come away from that going, what can makes me want to pick up a camera? What can I do that feels like this? This is exciting to me. And I get that buzz more from cinema than I do from photo books. Photo books sometimes, because it's too directly related to the fact that I'm a photographer, to walk that road might feel like I'm imitating them directly. You know, for them to inspire me like that, it feels safer to be inspired by cinema because there's, you know, there can't be that direct copy and there can't be that direct attempt to imitate. It's more, it's a more general inspiration. How could I do my own interpretation of what I'm seeing here, but in the still space, in the non-narrative space? And I find that fascinating. But yeah, I mean, I read a lot. Definitely, the videos that I make, they have the flavor they do because of the books I read. No doubt about it. That's what pushes content in that then comes out later for sure. So yeah, and my portrait work is definitely inspired more by painters than it is by photographers. So, you know, walking and I used to go sit in room 22 in the National Gallery, which is Rembrandt's room in London, and that's just to sit and look at those portraits. I got way more inspiration, and my lighting style is completely influenced by that very classical, simple one light approach to portraits, far more than trying to imitate or be inspired directly by other portrait photographers. So yeah, I try and keep those inspirations quite broad.
Yeah, that is a good room. I did when I did A-level art, we'd go down to London a lot and go and look at all the Rembrandt. I did some stuff on. In fact, they had, when I first moved to London, they had a really big exhibition of Raphael stuff as well, which is kind of for me there's a through line sort of there as well, like in terms of the color. As painting moves into that phase where people start to look like real people, as opposed to when people looked a bit of an odd shape and you know, like very flat but like had noses and just sort of fast. And then you're moving through that period of like there's lots of blue here depending on who paid for the painting because blue was expensive and you know, like things like that they want to show off. But it's interesting. I can totally see this is the second time Ripley has come up on the podcast actually, and I can completely see with your style, it's quite graphic, that a black and white series like that with some really compelling performances at the center, it would really kind of inspire you. Do you think of yourself more as a color or black and white photographer? Because in my head, when I think of your work, I think more of the kind of very graphic, hard shadow, street stuff that you did in the past in black and white. But maybe that's just I'm out of date.
It's funny that, I mean, I've had that for years that people, I mean, if you look at my feed now on Instagram, for example, there's hardly any black and white photographs being posted. I've definitely shifted over to color more, but I think people like find you at a point and then they put you in a box in their head. That's how I categorize you. And that just sticks. There's nothing wrong with that. That's just, they remember you how they found you. But yeah, over the last at least 2 years, I've definitely been shooting a lot more color than black and white. But there's still times, I mean, sometimes an image just needs to be in black and white. You know, there isn't any interesting color in, but there's a lot of interesting light and shadow. It's an automatic choice to move to black and white for that. So I don't have a rule for myself. I used to have this thing. I would post one color, one black and white, one color, one black and white the whole way down my feed. But I quickly abandoned that. I decided that I was more interested in the color stuff. So yeah, and I shoot everything in RAW anyway, so I get to decide later. And some I find will be equally strong in either, and I just make a choice. And some it's pretty obvious what it needs to be, and so it is. Yeah. And the street stuff I do is it's only kind of one area of what I do. It's what most people know me for because it's mostly what I post to Instagram, so it makes sense. But I would say I'm a much stronger portrait photographer than I am a street photographer. Some street photographers say I'm not a street photographer. I don't fit into that category. So, yeah, it's for me. I don't want to get too locked into a style. I did a talk in Oslo in last month, and to a street photography convention they started there, and I was saying there that, you know, I don't just want to be the diagonal shadow on a wall guy. You know, I mean, that I can do that on any sunny day in any city. I will always do that because I love it. I love the graphical nature of it. I'll always play with stuff like that. But if I'm only that,
Yeah.
I'm a one-trick pony. I found something that the internet seems to like, but I find very easy to do now. Instead of going, well, I need to push myself. I need to be able to shoot on cloudy days. I need to be able to shoot when there's no light out. I need to be able to shoot at night. I need to be able to shoot portraits and street and still life. I need to have a broad set of skills, not just find something I think people like and then give up growing. For me, it's really important to have a lot of tools in the toolbox.
Yeah, and presumably a lot of your portrait work, if it's commissioned, you're not really sharing that anyway, right? Because that's made for
No.
someone, if someone wants some headshots done.
Yeah. I mean, I am working on a longer term portrait project, but been very slow to get off the ground. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that I will share when it gets some traction. And that'll be very different. It'll feel like it has a very different flavor to the other stuff. And I'm glad, I'm glad that's the case. It should do for me. I should be able to do a lot of different things. But yeah, the client work I often don't share because, to be frank, it's not very good. I mean, most clients who hire you want cheap work done quickly. And there just isn't the time or the vision in what they want to be able to do work that I'm proud of. It's literally, I feel like a plumber then who's just going in with the plunger going, okay, what do you need done? And just that's how I use my cameras. Let's just get it done.
Well, yeah.
You'll get exactly what you want. You'll be happy with it, but it's not going anywhere near my portfolio because I'm not putting corporate headshots on my portfolio. It's not inspiring to look at. I can do it all day, but it's not interesting.
No, you're definitely beyond. I mean, I would say on your creative journey, you're probably beyond the point of needing to include that in your portfolio at this point. But also, sometimes, man has conquered the headshot. Like if someone needs a photograph, like if it's a byline for a newspaper or the sleeve of a book, like there might be a case for making some creative choices in the way the person looks and things. But broadly speaking, someone needs to be like, yes, this is me. I'm going to be on this thing here, or I wrote this, or maybe comedians for the Fringe is like the last place where you can like truly creatively play with a headshot or a kind of like fairly standard portrait because they're likely to have a bit more fun with it. I don't know, but
yeah. I mean, it's actors' headshots and stuff can be different, but corporate stuff, they all want exactly the same thing. It's just a production line. It's that they want, clean headshots on a white background for the website. There's not a lot of creativity to it, so you got to try, and you've got 30 seconds with a lot of people. But yeah, if you do get a client who wants to do something interesting, that's the stuff that can go on a portfolio. It might be an actor, it might be an author. They want some character in the images. The ones I'm doing now are that they want the character, and they're giving me creative control. They've seen the stuff on the website. They're like, we want you to do that thing you do, which is perfect for me because then I get to sort of put my stamp on things, and it's the client has a lot more trust. But I find that's quite rare.
Yeah. To get to collaborate like that and to kind of tweak the brief, it sounds like, as you're going. Like that sounds quite fun. You sort of try some things out and move back and forth. I would say, as much as you were saying, like some people wouldn't class you as a street photographer, like compared to the vast array of people who are posting photographs of the backs of people's heads, I think I think you are. Like I'm a bit scared of street photography, but no, I would say you definitely are.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, for me, the label honestly doesn't matter. I just want to make images that I like the look of, and I'm going to let everyone else argue about what box to put them in while I keep making images because it's not important to me. It's really not important. Like, it's because I mean, yesterday I posted an image of a cat sitting on a windowsill with a bit of light coming through behind it, so it's a silhouette. I mean, it's not a world-shattering image. It was a nice moment. I was in a house. They had a cat. That's what it looked like. I had my phone on me. You can argue about what that is. I don't care. I just like the look of it, and I think that's enough. It should be enough, right? To just make images we like the look of. It's good.
I mean, especially given the quantity of images that now get produced, because I think we've changed. There's a sacrifice. Like years gone by, if I wanted to see your work, I would have had to travel to somewhere, probably, like a big town like a York or somewhere like that, find the gallery where you're exhibiting. Maybe I would see your work for the first time just by walking by the window and not even know who you are and sort of go, oh, that looks nice. And I would tuck my newspaper under my arm and come and have a look for 15 minutes. And if I was lucky, you'd be there. And if not, I might pick up a thing and walk away and that's it. And that just kind of like, so the sheer volume, we're inundated with imagery to such an extent now that I think pleasing ourselves and pleasing a small number of people kind of has to be the goal, because otherwise, it's sort of happens playing out in other forms of media where that film The Fall Guy came out with Emily Blunt and Ryan Gosling in. which is great fun. Like I watched the TV show as a kid. They've kind of taken that idea and run with it. It's funny. It's got some good jokes. It's got amazing stunts in it. It's good fun. And the reporting is all this is bombed. It's failed at the box office. And it's like, well, I know what you want. Like they made a really, really good one of those with really famous people in that looks and sounds great.
Yeah.
I don't know what to tell you other than like maybe we've just got to change what we're doing.
Yeah.
And make more noodly weird indie stuff and just set our expectations. You see it in games a lot. We've worked on games that have sold gangbusters.
Yeah.
And then you hear, Square used to do this with the Final Fantasy games. This game has underperformed. It's like it's sold like 11 million copies. Like Final Fantasy 16 came out as a PlayStation 5 exclusive last year or earlier this year, and they're like, oh, it didn't sell very well. It's like, it's only on one platform. Like, what do you want? Like, it sold a really like 100-hour long Japanese role-playing game sold to like probably 20 million people, and you're like, oh, it underperformed. It's like, that's not their fault that you spent 10 years and billions on it. Right? Like, come on.
Exactly. Yeah.
Just your expectation. But yeah, very strange. On colour, by the way, I apologise to listeners because I will be talking about this all the time, probably until I'm old and grey. But the Joel Meyerowitz book, A Question of Colour, is brilliant. I don't know if you've seen and read that.
I have flicked through it, yeah.
I read it on a plane recently, and by the time I left Inverness Airport and by the time I landed in London, I was like, I need to take colour photos. Like it was a real transformational moment because he did that experiment with the side-by-side images. It was really interesting because I think it's a bit like the Alan Carr smoking book. Like you get to the end of it and it will have helped you to make a decision. I think you'll land on the side of color or black and white after looking through that book because it's quite dispassionate in a lot of ways. He goes on the side of color. He lands on the side of I want to represent a scene, and if you don't include color, for him, he's like, well, you're not representing the whole scene, which I thought was quite an interesting. It's like Simon Baxter's thing of like, I want people to look at this picture and feel like they can step into it, very consciously taking a photo of the thing in front of him rather than manipulating it too much. But yeah, I just found that a fascinating book, and I just seek every opportunity to mention it to people and people haven't seen it because it's great. I love it.
You're welcome, Joel.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. What I'll toss him a bone. I don't know if people have heard of him.
I mean, the two that have really inspired me recently with color is obviously Alex Webb and Harry Gruyere, who are kind of similar sorts of photographers in my mind as well. But it suits my aesthetic as well because I was shooting quite contrasty and letting the shadows fall quite dark. And those are two photographers who are doing that with color rather than black and white, and that's been quite inspiring to me as well. You can do that. I think in my head for a while, I thought, well, if it's contrasty, it has to be black and white. But of course it doesn't. You can utilize those colors too. And then it's just making a decision. What are you doing it for? If you're trying to shoot more like reportage documentary, then Joel's got a point. Represent the whole scene, and color is a part of that scene. But if you're trying to be more abstract or tell a story or pull some information out so that it makes it slightly more ethereal, then maybe black and white's the way to go. And him showing those side by sides proves that you can go either way. There's no right or wrong. You're just going to decide what you kind of connect to more.
Yeah, I think we also get away with murder now, don't we, with RAW, right? Like we know that the camera in our pocket probably has extremely fast, powerful autofocus. You probably got the shot more times than you might have done, or like that someone like him would have done when he was doing that experiment.
Oh yeah.
And so actually, you've always got that option available to you. You've always got choice. There's no reason not to shoot it in a really flexible way, and high megapixel sensors mean you can kind of crop down and get away with all sorts. I saw the cat the other day. I didn't realize the cat photo was a phone photo.
Yeah. It was just it was literally just sitting in the lounge. Cat was on the window, so I didn't have my camera on me, but I had a phone. That was enough.
Yeah. I need to get myself out of the head of like, someone messaged me recently and they were like, "Oh, do you want to use your phone for this photo?" And I was like, "No, I'm not an animal. Like, I want to use my camera, thanks." But
honestly, what they can do now, I mean, they're limited use. Obviously, I mean, you're not going to get a shallow depth of field out of them that's genuine. It's going to be all that computational rubbish, but if you just want to shoot a scene and you want everything in focus, I mean, I find myself pulling my phone out instead sometimes, because if I just want to shoot a sunset, I mean, some of that computational stuff that saves all that dynamic range, if I just want to share it as a story, I'm not going to make a printout, but just as a story, this is what I saw. It's far faster to get there on a phone, and the quality is is not bad at all. I mean, compared
No.
the leaps and bounds we've taken from 5 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, it's good enough to make an image with and share with the world. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, definitely acceptable, I would say. I've got a future guest on the show is going to be Victor from the company that made the Leica Lux app that just came out. They
Right.
bought that
Cool.
company, and I messaged him immediately because I hadn't used it. And I have to say, I've attached it to a button on my phone so I can launch that instead of my
Nice.
camera.
Yeah.
And it's actually really nice because the thing that I dislike about camera, phone images in general is that they're very hyper saturated. So it's like
Yeah.
going into a shop when you were a kid to buy a TV. And
Yes.
like the brightness and contrast and saturation is all cranked up
Yeah.
to 11, and because they're better now, but for a few years there they were just flattening out
Yeah.
highlight and shadow and just making the images like a bad version of like a log file almost, where they were
Looks
just
like
extremely flat.
saturated HDR or something, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, and now it's just it's too much. So I quite
Yeah.
like that they're trying to layer on top the color science, because I think that's probably
Yeah.
my M11 probably has a Sony sensor in it, right, or something like that. The reality is like, so it's all just Leica's own choices that
Yeah.
determine the colors, in the same way that it's the same with the Sony or a Ricoh or whatever.
Yeah.
So like I've tended to buy a thing that like gives me the look I want to kind of
Yes.
make that process as short as possible.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
if people love those Fujis or whatever, it doesn't matter. You just get the thing you like and then go.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, no, it's very nice. I did get actually. I got there was a tiny squirrel in our garden yesterday, sunning himself, little red squirrel, sunning
Cute.
himself on a bench in the garden, and I managed to. I went for a walk yesterday lunchtime, and I managed to get him with my phone, and then came in for my camera and my 135, and then obviously he heard a noise and was like, looked at
Right.
me, no, and just ran off. And so I was
Yeah.
glad I'd at least got
Yeah.
something to share with the kids and stuff like that. Because again, it's good enough. Not everything has to be art, I suppose,
Yeah,
which is the
absolutely.
pressure you can put on yourself. How do you kind of deal with that kind of pressure? Actually, that was something I thought about when I was reading and preparing for this, was the kind of the preparation, I guess, and to be better. Rob, who was on the podcast a few episodes back, who's a MotoGP photographer, talked about using the off season to kind of come back better. Like, unsurprisingly, he takes a very sporty feeling approach of like preparation in the off season and training almost, and kind of trying stuff out. Do you, from year to year, because you have the books that you kind of is in the back of your mind, I guess, every year, that you're kind of finding images and starting to tell a story through those. How do you think about preparing, I guess, for the next year?
I mean, my approach with that has shifted slightly. So I did those annual books for about 5 years. I did 5 collections. The last 2 years, I've switched to doing zines, magazines.
Ah, right.
And so January and July each year, I bring one out. The first one last year was on window light. The second one was on my journey to Namibia to shoot portraits with the Himba. The first one this year was on churches. So I get to tell some of my story with the church, but also show these images over the years of kind of these beautiful old churches. Because one of my habits is to go sit at the back of an old church in the city, just while no one's in there. I love the spaces. So I'm trying something new now, because those books used to be quite unfocused. I just used to throw 90 images up in any given year. That's what I saw. And then they're nice little time capsules for that reason. But I thought, if I want to grow up as a photographer, and especially if I'm writing a book like The Meaning in the Making, I need to learn how to bring it all together and focus and shoot images around a theme and write around a theme and present something that's more purposeful in its communication of both. So I think for me now, that the approach with those is I have 30, 40 folders on my desktop with different topic ideas. And then I've gone through all my archive of stuff and started to sort of pull stuff into those folders and see what I've got. And then if one of those folders has a reasonable amount in, I'll go, that's the next one. And I'll go out and shoot around that theme for a while to flesh it out and build it up, and then start to write around it. And when that thing feels ready, I'll, lay it out, print it off, and give it to the world. That's kind of how I approach it now. And I like the fact that it feels like growing up a bit and sort of trying to be more deliberate about communicating with visuals. And then it just means that if I'm not working on something specific, I've still got those 30, 40 project ideas swimming around the back of my brain. So when I am walking around, I'll head around and go, oh yeah, that might fit into that one on ice cream cones, or something random, whatever it is. I should shoot that. That might go in that folder. So because I've got those loose idea of projects for the next 10, 15 years on the go, I can slowly plug away at them as I'm shooting as well, beyond just shooting to have fun. And I think that's important too, is not always shooting for a purpose, but just shooting because it's the thing you love to do, right? If you don't, why are you doing it? Like, it should be, it gives us something back. It makes us happy. It fires us up. Like, do that too. And then maybe you take an image you didn't expect, and that becomes a whole folder. Oh, I should dig into that as a whole topic sometimes. So it's holding it all a little bit loosely and trying to have fun with it too, but on the output end, hopefully giving it some focus.
Yeah, I really love that idea of holding it loosely and having variety available to you, so that if you move down something, because I think if you've got one thing and then that doesn't come off, or it's dependent on the weather or dependent on access or something, like that can be a real blocker to doing anything. Whereas if you've got a few things that you can kind of maybe pick up and turn your hand to, I really like that idea. It's really nice. Starting projects is hard, and I think you got to set yourself up for success when you can,
Very hard. It's very difficult. It's I feel like that's, until now I've been kind of in a lot of ways still a baby photographer, and now this is like the start of me working out how to communicate with images properly. I mean, a lot of my contemporaries have got books out. I'm just not ready. I just haven't learned how to do it well enough. I want to do these magazines for a while and really practice that skill of putting together a body of work. I don't just want to throw something out because I need a book out and I have to sell a book, because that's what photographers do. I want it to be good, and when I start that, I want to be able to keep going and have a solid skill set there. So I'm trying to do it in the right order.
Yeah, I felt a similar way about doing this, in a way that, like, I'm in my 40s now, and I kind of don't think I could have done it earlier, like proficiently. It's a bit like, once you can expose an image and it's in focus and you've framed it fairly pleasingly or whatever, it's like that's really just the beginnings. That Cartier-Bresson thing of like your first 10,000 photos will be your worst, right? Like for sure. And I think when one of my friends, Mel, who was on the podcast a couple of weeks back, wanted to be interviewed, she was like, why haven't you interviewed me yet? And, she was a bit put out, to be honest. But what I said to her was, if I interview strangers and it's a disaster, then that's okay.
Yes, absolutely. I never have to talk to them again. Yeah.
Exactly. They'll never see me again. And it's the same with where we live in Scotland, in the Highlands. There's a couple of local photographers who I know fairly well, and I'm going to have them on. But it's like, I said the same thing to them. It's like, I just wanted to be sure that I could do it to a level before I started interviewing friends, because the best outcome of this is I get to talk to people whose work I admire and hopefully strike up a bit of a friendship with them. But if it all goes to pot, then, oh, well, never mind, no harm, no foul. But if I mess up my relationships with people I'm already friendly with, that would I would feel that they would forgive me. Of course, they're lovely people. But I would feel bad putting them in a position where they have to, like, pretend that it's going great. And pretend that they're having a lovely time, when in fact they're finding this very hard. I'm quite good mates with Dan Baker, the photographer who lives in Cleethorpes, with the ice creams, right?
Yes, and I did a video with him a few years ago. Yeah.
Oh yes, of course. Yeah, it came up in the conversation, because I joked that I just started, because that's what I do, is I just hit record and then we jump into the episode. And about 5 minutes in, I think I left it in the recording. 5 minutes in, he's just like, "Sorry, is this the thing?" And I was like, "Yeah, this is it." And I made a joke about how, like, I obviously hadn't set this up as well as Sean had. Like, and I was like, he's like, well, he's like, Sean set the standard, so you've confused.
Well, when you got cameras in your face and you go, okay, here's your first question. I make it fairly obvious.
Yeah. See, I don't. I just Mark Maron this. And
that's great, though. That's great.
Well, I think that's part of what makes it different. Like, if you were to do a very formal sit down, like, there's tons of people doing that. There's tons of people doing a very formal sit down, like, my next guest is Sean and he's here to talk about and like, tell me about the thing. And it's sort of, I could make it look like Between Two Ferns or something like that, or we could just do the thing that I literally dreamt of on Christmas Eve last year, and then started making. So it's quite good. But he was funny. He rang me shortly after, and he was like, "No, it's really good. I'm really," and he was very surprised, which was nice. So it was good. That was when I felt like, right, okay, well, I'll ask him now. Like, if he's enjoying it and he's in the car and it feels quite good, it's sort of. But I'm not looking at the numbers. Is the other thing, which I think you would enjoy, because it's like, no, it's no point. What number would be enough? Is the problem.
Well, that's it. And also, podcasts have way lower viewer numbers than something like a YouTube. And then you start comparing audience sizes to cross platforms. It's not a reasonable expectation. just find your audience and build that
Exactly.
core. I mean, for me, that Kevin Kelly 1,000 True Fans article was
Yes.
really influential. About it's not the size of your audience that matters. It's can you build a core audience that you can sustain what you do
Yeah.
for a long period of time. And honestly, that's all the goal is. I don't care what number gets attached to it. If I can keep paying my bills and making work I love, I'm already at maximum. There's no like,
Yeah.
well, I'll be at maximum when I get 1 million subscribers. It means nothing to me. It
Yeah.
honestly means
To
nothing
what
to me.
end?
If I could sustain myself and have 10,000 subscribers and be happy making the work I make, or struggle at 1 million subscribers, I'd definitely rather have the 10,000 and live the life I want to live. Absolutely.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, people become a slave to the thing they make fairly quickly. You know,
Yes.
you see it with people in charge of companies a lot, that they're
Yeah.
not. You know, everyone easy examples. People like Tim Cook. You know, everyone assumes like, oh, they've got all the freedom in the world. They really don't. Like they are in charge. He runs the Death Star, right? Like he
Yeah.
runs this massive thing that
Yeah.
is beyond his control.
Yes.
And you've just got to constantly grow. And if you try and sit down and have a conversation with shareholders about how actually the responsible thing at this size is this and that and the other thing, they'll go, that's great, Tim, it's time to retire, and they'll replace you with someone who'll do what they want. So
Yeah.
it doesn't matter. Like you saw the board of X a few weeks ago, or no, Tesla it was, voting for a $56 billion pay packet for Elon, and like the head of that, the chairman of that board going, oh, well, he's a fairly unique person and we really need to push this through. And it's like, well, what's the back end for you, man?
Yeah.
You appear to be standing up this person who's, fairly problematic in a bunch of ways.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
But I guess you're just like, if I just do this, I can move to Tahiti. But so what? Like, what's the point?
Exactly. Well, it's starting out early on and working out what are you doing it for? Like, what are you really after here? And getting honest. And I think a lot of young photographers in particular start out, well, I want to get famous and I want lots of money.
Yeah.
That's okay. I mean, a lot of us start out there, but I think over time you're going to realize that there is no amount of fame or fortune that's going to make you happy, and you're going to slide into that second half of life where you realize actually it's not important. I need to make work I believe in and have a core audience that sustains me doing that. And that's not about huge numbers. That's a better, more realistic goal that stands you in better stead when it comes to things like having lower anxiety and more happiness and more fulfillment in your life. And to me, that's actually what I'm after. It's just getting honest about that.
Yeah. When I see posts on things like Threads and Instagram where people are like, I want to be a Sony ambassador, or I want to be a Fuji ambassador, or whatever, it's like, well, be careful what you wish for, because once you can only use one piece of kit forever.
Yeah.
Like,
and also you're not actually going to get anything out of it. I mean, I've met with a few of these companies when it's come to ambassador stuff. They've wanted to chat. I've always turned it down. I can't see the value in it. Like they most of them won't even give you free gear. They'll give you a discount. So you're still buying your own cameras mostly. If you are an ambassador and they're giving you cameras, that's nice. You save a bit, but look at what they're asking you. They'll want ads all over your posts. You're never allowed to mention another camera brand. You're locked in. They own. There's a lot to do with your images as well with some of them, that they want to be able to use them wherever they want in their ads. Like you start to lose control of your work. They're getting way more out of you than you're getting out of them, and that's the truth. Like that's what's actually happening. And I think we think, oh, it's going to validate me. It's going to prove that I'm a good photographer. That will quickly wear off when you realize that. Looking at some of the other people who they have as ambassadors, there's politics involved. There's who knows who involved. There's work in there that's really not good. And people who are out there who are photographers, being an ambassador only impresses beginner photographers. It doesn't impress anybody else. So if your goal is to impress beginner photographers, you need better standards. You need better goals. Like it's got to be about something more than that. And I'm not even convinced it gets you work. Like I've spoken to, I had a friend who was a Fuji ambassador, and I asked him, I said, if you're honest with me, genuinely, do you think you get more work as a photographer because you're a Fuji ambassador? And he said, no. No, I get work as a speaker at the odd conference, but that doesn't make me that much money. But no, I my clients are my clients. It doesn't make that much difference. So this idea that the minute you get that, the world will be your oyster and it'll all go super smoothly. Talk to some ambassadors. It's not how it works at all.
No, completely. I think we go full circle. Like whichever, whether it's social media or whether it's tying yourself to a brand, like you're giving too much to like a company, and companies have to behave like companies behave. They don't behave like, this is not really a relationship. It doesn't matter what size of company it is. They've got shareholders, they've got things to hit, they've got to sell more things.
Yeah.
You're just a cog in the machine. might feel nice in the moment. It's probably not going to, improve your work massively if you on a deadline have to do something you don't believe in and then give it away.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
Is the reality. Well, thank you so much for talking and taking some time to have a chat. I think I could probably talk to you all afternoon, but you've got a life to live. But
That was lovely, and thank you. I've enjoyed this. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's been really good. Is there anything you want to point people at before we wrap up as a kind of like, come and find me here? I'm sure everyone listening will already know you and that's why they're here, but...
you can find me, Sean Tucker, on YouTube. If you search it, you can find me at Sean Tuck, SeanTuck on Instagram. Both of those have links to my website. So yeah, you can find me anywhere there.
Yeah, there was a period of time very early on in your Instagram life where in my head, I used to have to correct myself because I referred to you as Sean Tuck in my head because I saw you.
Yeah. Sean Tuck on mistaken. I had to do it. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's better than having a number on the end.
True. Yeah, true.
Sean Tucker 12 or something.
Yeah.
Unless you're an athlete, you can't get away with that.
No.
Oh, cool. Well, thanks, man. I will hopefully speak to you again at some point in the future.
You're welcome. Lovely to chat to you.
You too. Take care, mate.
Bye. Take care. Bye.
Well, thanks again to Sean there for taking part in that. It was a good conversation. I enjoyed it. If you enjoyed it, then you can help the show by giving us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever it is that you happen to listen to podcasts. And you can sign up for the weekly newsletter. That goes out every Wednesday, and you can sign up on ianfarrell.com/sign-up. There is a link to it in the show notes. Until next time, have a lovely week. We'll see you soon.